We don't tell these stories the easy way. Not with polished voices or perfect pacing or words that have been sanded down until they mean nothing. We tell them the way they were lived. Uneven. Human. With all the weight still attached. Because in the end, what matters isn't how clean a story sounds. It's whether it still carries what it's supposed to. My name is Elias Vaughn. I was not meant to be part of First Contact. I was not a diplomat. Not a politician. Not one of the carefully trained voices chosen to represent us at the edge of everything we didn't understand. I was an engineer. Systems maintenance, long-range vessels, structural integrity, environmental stability, failure prediction. The kind of work that only matters when something has already gone wrong. Which, as it turns out, is exactly when everything important happens. The station where it began didn't have a name people used out loud. Officially, it was Relay Point K-17. To the crews who passed through it, it was something else. A pause. A place between places. And, for 3 days, it was the only place in human space where we were not alone. Relay Point K-17 had been designed to avoid offense. That was the official language. In practice, it meant the station had been stripped of anything that could be interpreted as intentional. No sharp architectural identity. No cultural markers. No color palette that leaned too far toward any known preference curve. Every surface existed in a narrow band of neutrality, calibrated through a dozen advisory committees who had each removed something until nothing remained that could be called a decision. The result was a place that functioned perfectly and felt like nothing at all. The corridors were wide enough for 3 species classifications, though we had only ever needed one. The lighting adjusted continuously, compensating for hypothetical visual ranges that had never been confirmed. Even the air carried a faint sterility that wasn't quite antiseptic and wasn't quite natural. It made people quieter. Not by rule. Not by instruction. Just by presence. I had been stationed there for 11 months when the message came through. Not a signal in the conventional sense. No burst transmission. No encoded packet riding a carrier wave. It arrived as a correction. One moment, the long-range array was reporting empty space across all monitored bands. The next, there was something where nothing had been. Not incoming. Not approaching. Just present, as though the instruments had been wrong until they weren't. We ran diagnostics first. We always ran diagnostics first. Sensor drift. Calibration error. Ghost imaging. Software fault. Nothing. Every system agreed. There was an object positioned just beyond the outer marker field, holding perfectly still relative to the station. No propulsion signature. No thermal bleed. No radiation profile that matched anything in our catalogue. It wasn't invisible. It was simply resolved. Like something that had always been there, waiting for us to notice. The first visual feed took 12 seconds to stabilize. I remember that because no one spoke during those 12 seconds, and that was unusual. Even in controlled environments, people fill silence. They comment. They speculate. They make noise just to confirm that they're still part of the room. This time, they didn't. The image clarified gradually, not sharpening so much as settling into coherence. The object had no hard edges. That was the first thing my brain rejected. Not rounded. Not curved in any conventional sense. It was continuous in a way that didn't map cleanly onto manufactured structure. Surfaces flowed into one another without seam or junction, like a single piece shaped without ever being assembled. The station's running lights touched it and behaved strangely. Not reflection. Not absorption. Something closer to interruption. As if the light had to reconsider what it was doing before continuing. "Is that a hull?" someone asked quietly. No one answered. Because the question assumed a framework we weren't sure applied. Scale was difficult to determine at first. The absence of reference points made it feel smaller than it was, until the docking array recalibrated and overlaid distance markers. 400 meters. Close enough that we should have detected it long before we did. Close enough that its presence felt less like arrival and more like realization. Command was notified within 30 seconds. By the time the official response protocols engaged, The station had already shifted. You could feel it. Not in any measurable way. Not something a sensor would log. But in the way people moved. More deliberate. More aware of the space between actions. As though the station had acquired an observer. The diplomatic team arrived 2 hours later. They came prepared for uncertainty in the way professionals always do. Layers of procedure, fallback language, carefully structured response trees designed to absorb the unexpected without revealing it. At the center of them was the appointed contact lead. Commander Alina Rowe. She moved through the station like she belonged to it in a way the rest of us never quite managed. Not comfortable, exactly, but aligned. As if she understood the purpose behind the neutrality and chose to operate within it rather than against it. I had seen her once before, briefly, during a systems inspection. She had asked 3 questions. Each of them precise. Each of them necessary. And then she had moved on without comment. Now she stood in the observation chamber, hands resting lightly behind her back, looking out at the object that had not arrived. "Open a channel," she said. The communications officer hesitated. "On what frequency, Rowe considered that for a fraction of a second. Then, "Try all of them." We did. Nothing happened. No response. No signal return. No acknowledgement of any kind. The object remained exactly where it was, unchanged, unmoving, uninterested in the distinction between our attempt and our silence. Minutes passed. Then, without warning, the station received a transmission. Not through the array. Not through any system we controlled. It appeared directly within the internal network, as though it had originated there. No encryption. No header. Just a single line of text, displayed simultaneously across every active console. "We would like to understand you." No one spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, but because, for the first time since the object had been noticed, it had spoken first. I wasn't supposed to be in the room when they answered. Engineering staff don't get seats at first contact. We build the systems that make those rooms possible, and then we leave them to people who know how to use words as tools instead of outcomes. But Relay Point K-17 had a staffing problem that week. 2 senior systems officers were off station. One was recovering from a decompression incident that hadn't been as minor as the report suggested, and the remaining workload had been redistributed in the way it always is, quietly and without asking whether the redistribution made sense. So when the diplomatic team requested a live structural and environmental specialist present during initial exchange, in case of unforeseen interface variables, was how they phrased it, I was the nearest available body with the right clearance. That's how I ended up standing 3 meters behind Commander Rowe when humanity said its first word to something that had already decided to speak to us. "Route response through standard relay," she said, not turning. "No modifications." The communications officer nodded, hands moving with the controlled precision of someone aware that history had a tendency to notice small mistakes. "What do we say?" he asked. Rowe was quiet for a moment. Not hesitating. Selecting. "We say the truth," she said. Then, after the smallest pause, "We just choose which truth." She stepped forward slightly, enough that the station's internal capture systems would register her as the primary speaker. "My name is Commander Alina Rowe," she said, her voice level, unforced. "I represent the human presence in this sector. We acknowledge your message." A beat. No response. Not silence. Just, no change. Rowe continued. "You've stated a desire to understand us. We are willing to engage in that process." Another pause. Still nothing. Behind her, I became aware of my own posture in a way that annoyed me. Shoulders squared. Hands loosely clasped. The stance you default to when you don't know what to do with yourself but understand that doing something wrong would be noticeable. I shifted my weight slightly and forced myself to relax. This wasn't my field. It wasn't my moment. Then the reply came. Not through the speakers. Not as sound. As text again, appearing across the consoles with the same quiet certainty as before. "Your acknowledgement is received." There was a quality to it that I couldn't place at first. Not the words. The absence around them. No delay. No transmission artifact. No sense of distance traveled. It didn't feel like a message that had been sent. It felt like a message that had been placed. Ro didn't react to that. If she noticed, she gave no indication. "What form of engagement do you propose?" she asked. This time, the response was immediate. "Direct interaction is preferred." A flicker of movement from the diplomatic staff behind me. Not alarm. Not even concern. Adjustment. Protocol trees shifting in real time. Ro's head tilted slightly. "Define direct." There was a longer pause this time. Not empty. Evaluative. Then, "We will come aboard your station." The room changed. Again, nothing measurable. But every person present understood the shift. Until that moment, the object had been external. Observed. Contained by the simple fact that it was not here. Now that distinction was gone. "Understood," Ro said. No hesitation. No visible recalculation. "We will prepare to receive you." She didn't ask how. She didn't ask when. Those were questions you asked when you believed the answers would operate within your expectations. Instead, she turned slightly. "Engineering," she said. I realized, a fraction too late, that she meant me. "Yes, Full environmental adaptability in Docking Bay 3. Atmosphere variable, pressure gradients unlocked, containment protocols active but non-intrusive. I don't want anything that reads as defensive unless it needs to be." "Yes, Assume we don't know what they require," she added. "Build for flexibility, not control." That part one understood. That part was mine. I nodded once and turned to leave. "Elias." I stopped. Turned back. Ro was looking at me now, directly for the first time since I'd entered the room. Her expression hadn't changed. But her focus had. "Stay available," she said. "If something behaves in a way we don't expect, I want someone here who understands how this station fails." It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't meant to be. It was a recognition of function. And it was exactly the kind of role I was built for. "Yes, I said. Then I left the room and went to prepare a space for something we did not understand. Knowing, with a certainty that sat just below conscious thought, that whatever came through that airlock would not experience the station the way we did. Docking Bay 3 had been designed for variables, not unknowns. There's a difference. Variables are things you can anticipate within a range. You don't know the exact value, but you understand the boundaries. You prepare for pressure shifts, atmospheric composition changes, biological contaminants, structural incompatibilities. You build systems that bend without breaking. Unknowns don't have boundaries. Unknowns are where systems stop being solutions and start being guesses. I configured the bay for maximum adaptability anyway. Atmospheric processors were set to open loop, ready to cycle composition on demand. Pressure controls were uncoupled from standard safety limits, allowing for rapid recalibration if needed. Environmental fields were active but passive, monitoring without interfering. No visible weapons. No hard containment. Just a space that could become whatever it needed to be. Or fail trying. The rest of the engineering team worked quietly around me, each of them focused on their section. Each of them aware that this wasn't a drill and wasn't something we could practice for later. We finished ahead of schedule. There's a particular kind of silence that follows preparation. Not relief. Not calm. Just the absence of motion when everything that can be done has been done. I stood at the control interface overlooking the bay and waited. 32 minutes after the initial confirmation, the station registered proximity. No approach vector. No deceleration curve. Just closer. The object that had been 400 meters out was now aligned with Docking Bay 3 as though it had always intended to be. "Do we have movement logs?" one of the techs asked. I checked. No. No data. No movement. The system hadn't recorded transition. Only state change. Before. After. Nothing in between. "Prepare for contact," came Commander Ro's voice over the internal channel. She was already on her way. I could hear it in the cadence, measured, controlled, but faster than her baseline. We all felt it now. That sense again. Not being watched. That wasn't quite right. More like included. As if the space itself had expanded to account for something new, and we were inside that expansion whether we acknowledged it or not. The outer airlock door cycled open. There was no sound from the other side. No mechanical engagement. No signal ping. No request for access. Just the door, opening into space that was no longer empty. The object was there. Closer than the visual feeds had suggested. Or perhaps more present. Up close, the absence of seams was more pronounced. There was no indication of assembly. No suggestion that it had ever been constructed in parts. It existed as a single, continuous form, its surface shifting subtly as though responding to something we couldn't perceive. The station lights touched it again. And again, they hesitated. Not physically. Conceptually. Like light itself needed permission. Commander Rowe entered the control room without announcement, 2 members of her team following a step behind. She took in the scene in a single sweep. Status. Docking bay is stable, I said. All systems green. No environmental anomalies. That was true. Technically. Any communication. None since confirmation. She nodded once and stepped closer to the viewing interface. Open inner door, she said. No one moved immediately. Not because we didn't understand the command. Because we understood it completely. That door had never been opened to something we didn't have at least a model for. Do it, she added, not raising her voice. I initiated the sequence. The inner airlock door began to cycle. Heavy mechanisms, designed for reliability over elegance, engaged with the familiar sequence of locks disengaging, seals retracting, pressure equalization checks that meant less now than they ever had before. The door slid open. Nothing came through. At first. The bay remained exactly as it had been. Empty, except for the presence that wasn't empty. Then. Something changed. Not in the air. Not in the pressure. In us. It was subtle. Small enough that I almost dismissed it. A shift in focus. Like the moment you realize you've been thinking about something without noticing when it started. I became aware of my own breathing. Not faster. Just louder. More present. Beside me, one of the techs adjusted his stance, then stilled, as though he'd caught himself moving unnecessarily. Commander Rowe didn't move at all. She stood perfectly still, eyes fixed on the open bay. Seconds passed. Then, from the threshold, they entered. Not walking. Not floating. Transitioning. There was no clear motion. No step, no propulsion, no crossing of distance in the way our brains expect. One moment, the space beyond the door was occupied only by that seamless exterior. The next. There were 4 figures standing inside the bay. They had shape. Defined outlines. Limbs, proportions, symmetry that mapped close enough to human that recognition came before analysis. But they did not feel like bodies in space. They felt resolved. As though they had been there all along, and our perception had simply caught up. The tallest of them stood slightly forward. Not in dominance. In representation. Its features were readable. Not identical to ours. But not alien in the way we had prepared for. Eyes that held light rather than reflected it. Surface textures that seemed stable until you tried to focus on them directly, at which point they shifted just enough to escape precise definition. Commander Rowe stepped forward. Exactly 1 pace. No more. Welcome to relay point K17, she said. Her voice did not change. Not even slightly. My name is Commander Alina Rowe. We are prepared to begin. The figure at the front tilted its head. A small motion. Careful. Observational. And then. It made a sound. Not loud. Not complex. A single, soft tone. But the moment it did, something inside my chest tightened. Not pain. Not fear. Recognition. Uninvited. Unexplained. As if that sound had aligned, perfectly and precisely, with something I hadn't known was there. No one reacted to the sound. Not outwardly. That was the first sign we were already adapting. In any other context, any controlled test, any unfamiliar stimulus, there would have been a measurable response. A glance exchanged. A shift in posture. Someone checking a readout to confirm what they had just heard. Instead, the room held steady, as though we had collectively decided, without speaking, that nothing unusual had happened. Commander Rowe inclined her head slightly. "Thank you for coming aboard," she said. The figure regarded her for a moment longer. Then it spoke. Its voice did not come from a single point. It was not directional. It existed in the space between us, as though the air itself had been persuaded to carry meaning. "We acknowledge your reception." The translation was immediate. Seamless. Too seamless. There was no lag, no processing artifact, no indication that language had been converted rather than understood. Rowe didn't comment on that. "We are prepared to facilitate your stated objective," she said. "You wish to understand us." A pause. Not empty. Focused. "We do," the figure said. Behind it, the other three remained still, their attention distributed in a way that felt layered. Not each observing something different. All observing everything. "We will require context," it continued. "Your structures. Your systems. The environments in which your kind operates." Rowe nodded once. "That can be arranged." She gestured lightly toward the interior corridor. "This station is designed as a neutral relay point. It may not represent the full range of human environments, but it will provide a starting framework." The figure's head tilted again. A fraction further this time. "Neutrality," it said. The word sounded examined. As an intentional state, Rowe clarified. "Understood." Another pause. Then, "We accept." There was no formal agreement. No negotiation. Just progression. Rowe turned slightly, indicating the path forward. "If you'll follow me." They did. Not with footsteps. Not with any visible mechanics of movement. They were simply elsewhere. Each transition precise, controlled, as though distance was a suggestion rather than a constraint. I found myself moving as well, falling into position along the side of the corridor, maintaining observational distance without being intrusive. That had been my instruction. Stay available. Watch for failure. The corridor beyond Docking Bay 3 was identical to every other corridor on K-17. Same neutral tones. Same adaptive lighting. Same careful absence of identity. And yet, walking through it now felt different. Not because the space had changed. Because it was being experienced. That was the closest I could get to it. The presence of the visitors didn't alter the station. It altered the act of being in it. Commander Rowe spoke as they moved. "This station operates as a communication and transfer hub between outer system routes," she said. "Its design prioritizes interoperability and minimal environmental bias." The lead figure turned its attention to the walls. To the lighting. To the space itself. "Bias reduction," it said. "Yes." "Why?" The question was immediate. Direct. Rowe didn't hesitate. "To avoid imposing our preferences on unknown others." A pause. Then, "You anticipated contact." "We prepared for it." Preparation implies expectation. Rowe allowed herself the smallest shift in expression. Not quite a smile. "Hope," she said. "More than expectation." The figure considered that. "Hope," it repeated. This time, the word carried something else with it. Not meaning. Wait. Subtle. But present. We reached the observation chamber overlooking the station's outer ring. Rowe paused at the threshold. "This space provides visual access to the surrounding sector," she said. "It may assist in contextualizing our position." The figure moved past her. Again, not walking. Transitioning. It stopped at the viewport. Looked out. At the stars. At the distant lines of traffic. At the quiet movement of human infrastructure stretching across distances we had only recently learned to cross. For a moment. Nothing happened. Then, it made the sound again. That soft, melodic tone. Longer this time. More complex. And the effect was immediate. Not on the room. On us. I felt it first as a pressure behind the sternum. Not physical. Not quite emotional. Something between. Like standing at the edge of a memory you couldn't fully recall. Beside me, one of the techs inhaled sharply. Then stopped. As if he'd caught himself reacting. Commander Rowe remained still. Composed. But I saw it. The fraction of a second where her focus shifted inward. Then locked again. "What are you doing?" she asked. Calm. Even. The figure did not turn from the viewport. Observing, it said. That sounded like more than observation. Another pause. Then. It was alignment. The word settled into the space with quiet precision. Alignment with what? Rowe asked. This time, the figure did turn. Its gaze moved across the room. Not scanning. Receiving. With you, it said. Silence followed. Not empty. Dense. Rowe held its gaze. For what purpose? To improve understanding. There was no threat in the words. No implication of harm. And yet, something about them resisted easy acceptance. Rowe inclined her head slightly. As long as that understanding remains reciprocal. It does. The answer came without delay. Without hesitation. As though the concept of imbalance had not occurred to it. Rowe accepted that. For now. Then we will continue, she said. She turned, leading them deeper into the station. And the conversation resumed. Measured. Controlled. Logical. They asked about our systems. Our energy distribution. Our structural redundancies. Why we built things with failure in mind. Why we allowed for degradation instead of eliminating it. Rowe answered each question with precision. Clarity. Restraint. From the outside. It was a successful exchange. Stable. Productive. Exactly what first contact was supposed to look like. But beneath that, something was changing. Small. Incremental. Each time the figure made that sound. That alignment. The effect lingered a little longer. The pressure. The awareness. The sense that something just beyond conscious thought was being touched. Not aggressively. Not forcibly. Just. Accessed. And no one said anything. Because nothing had gone wrong. Not yet. They did not ask immediately. That was the first indication that the question mattered. Up to that point, everything had followed a pattern. Inquiry. Response. Clarification. Each exchange cleanly structured. Each topic approached with a kind of deliberate sequencing that suggested method rather than curiosity. Context first. Then expansion. Then refinement. It was efficient. It was controlled. And it gave the impression, accurate or not, that nothing in the interaction was being wasted. We had moved through 3 sections of the station by then. Energy distribution. Habitat rings. Structural maintenance corridors. They asked about redundancy. About failure tolerance. About the way we designed systems to degrade instead of collapse. Rowe answered all of it. Calmly. Precisely. She gave them truth, but not all of it. Not yet. The shift came in the 4th section. Not in what they asked. In how they asked it. We were in a secondary operations chamber, a space used for traffic coordination and long-range routing. It was one of the few areas on the station where function had overridden neutrality, not visually, but structurally. The interfaces were denser. The systems more interconnected. The room felt purposeful. The lead figure paused near the central display. Its attention moved across the data streams, the projected routes, the constant low-level adjustments that kept human movement through space from becoming chaos. It made the sound again. Softer this time. Shorter. But the effect was sharper. I felt it like a memory that didn't belong to me. Gone before I could identify it. Commander Rowe noticed. I saw it in the way her focus tightened, the way her posture adjusted by degrees too small for anyone not watching closely. She didn't interrupt. She let the moment pass. The figure turned. Not just to her. To all of us. We have observed your structures, it said. Your systems. Your methods of continuity and preservation. A pause. Then. They are consistent. Ro inclined her head slightly. In what way? They reflect an underlying pattern. That word again. Pattern. Not design. Not intention. Something deeper. We would like to understand the source of that pattern. The room stilled. Not visibly, but completely. Ro didn't answer immediately. She let the question settle. Measured it. Then. What kind of understanding are you seeking? The figure held her gaze. Not challenging. Not passive. Exact. We have studied what you have built, it said. We have analyzed the outputs of your civilization. A fractional shift in tone. Still calm. But more focused. These things describe what your species produces. A pause. Then, with quiet precision. They do not describe what produces your species. No one moved. No one spoke. Because the distinction was absolute. Ro's expression did not change. But something in her attention sharpened. You're asking about origin, she said. Not origin, the figure replied. Cause. Another pause. Longer this time. Deliberate. We would like, it continued, to observe a structure that reflects your species without mediation. The words were carefully chosen. Each one placed. Not a single one unnecessary. Ro understood that. I could see it. The way she processed the phrasing. The implications. What kind of structure, she asked. The figure did not hesitate. One that embodies the conditions under which your patterns were formed. The room felt smaller. Not physically. Conceptually. Ro took a single breath. Controlled. Measured. You want something representative, she said. Yes. Of what we are. A pause. Then. Of what made you. That landed differently. Heavier. Because it removed interpretation. Removed distance. This wasn't a request to see our achievements. Or our ideals. Or the version of ourselves we chose to present. It was a request to see. The thing behind all of that. Ro's gaze shifted briefly. Not to me. To the room. To the systems. To the quiet, controlled environment we had constructed to make this interaction possible. Then back to them. That kind of structure, she said slowly, is not something we typically use for diplomacy. We are not requesting diplomacy, the figure said. The answer came without friction. Without adjustment. We are requesting understanding. Silence followed. Not uncertain. Decisive. Because the question had already been answered. Just not out loud. Ro held that silence for 3 seconds. No more. Then she nodded once. Understood, she said. Her voice did not change. But the direction of the entire encounter did. We will consider your request. The figure inclined its head. Acceptance. Not satisfaction. Not expectation. Just acknowledgement. And in that moment, before anything had been chosen, before any decision had been spoken, I knew, whatever we showed them next, would not be neutral. And it would not be safe. The meeting adjourned without formality. No closing statements. No procedural wrap. Just a mutual recognition that the next step did not belong in the same kind of room as the conversation that had led to it. Commander Ro dismissed the visitors with a measured nod and arranged for them to remain within Docking Bay 3, under observation but without restriction. They did not object. They did not ask questions. They simply stayed. As if waiting was not a state for them. As if it was just another form of presence. The rest of us moved. Fast. But controlled. There's a particular energy that takes hold when a decision hasn't been made yet, but everyone involved understands that it will define everything that follows. We gathered in briefing room 2. Small. Sealed. Functional. A space designed for clarity. Lieutenant Hale had already populated the central display by the time Ro entered. Multiple schematics hovered in layered projection. Ships, installations, planetary facilities. each one tagged, categorized, ready for selection. Options. That's what we told ourselves they were. Options imply equivalence. They weren't. Ro took her place at the head of the table. "Walk me through it," she said. Hale nodded and expanded the first schematic. "Explorer-class vessel Meridian," he said. "Multi-species compatibility. Modular environments. Designed specifically for cooperative contact scenarios. It's the cleanest representation we have of what we intend to be." Clean. That word mattered. Ro studied the schematic. Sleek lines. Balanced systems. Every element intentional. No visible compromise. "No," she said. "No explanation. Just elimination." Hale didn't hesitate. The next schematic replaced it. Kepler fabrication array. Fully automated manufacturing platform. High efficiency. Large-scale production. Demonstrates our capacity for coordination and infrastructure development. The projection shifted. Vast structures. Precise. Orderly. Optimized. Cold. Impressive. And empty of anything that resembled us. Ro shook her head slightly. "What does it say about us," she said, "that we would show them a factory?" Hale moved on. Habitation Ring Epsilon 9. Civilian. Long-term stability. Cultural integration. It's one of our most successful attempts at sustainable off-world living. This one felt closer. Not perfect. But controlled. Designed to feel like something. A version of home. Ro watched it for a few seconds longer than the others. Then, "No." The room remained quiet. No one argued. Because we all understood what was happening. She wasn't rejecting the options. She was rejecting the premise behind them. "These are all representations," she said finally. Hale glanced at her. "They're accurate representations, They're curated." That landed. Harder than anything else she had said. "They show what we've decided to become," she continued. "They show intention. Progress. Control." Her gaze moved across the room. Meeting each of us briefly. "What they asked for isn't that." No one responded. Because there wasn't a counterpoint. There was only the thing none of us had said yet. Lieutenant Imoni spoke first. Quietly. "There is another option." The room shifted. Not visibly. But completely. Ro turned to her. "Go on." Imoni hesitated. Not out of uncertainty. Out of weight. "The Aegis platform," she said. "Decommissioned. Outer ring storage. It's intact. Preserved." Hale exhaled slowly. "That's not a contact environment," he said. "That's real," Imoni cut in. The word hung there. Uncomfortable. Accurate. Ro didn't look at Hale. She was still watching Imoni. "Explain," she said. "The Aegis wasn't designed to represent anything," Imoni said. "It was built to survive. Everything about it, structure, systems, layout, it exists because something failed somewhere else first." She paused. Chose her next words carefully. "It's not efficient. It's not clean. It's layered. Modified. Repaired. Repaired again." Her eyes didn't leave Ro. "It's what we actually are when no one's watching." Silence. Not uncertain. Recognizing. Hale shook his head slightly. "You bring them there," he said. "You're not showing them humanity. You're showing them damage." Ro's expression didn't change. "What's the difference?" she asked. No one answered. Because there wasn't one. Not really. Hale tried anyway. "We're past that," he said. "We've built better. We've moved beyond." "Have we?" Ro asked. Still calm. Still level. But sharper now. Hale stopped. Because that question wasn't rhetorical. It was precise. And dangerous. Ro stood. Moved to the viewport at the far side of the room. Looked out at the station. The controlled, neutral space we had built to make ourselves easier to understand. "This station," she said, "is a translation." She didn't turn. "It exists to make us readable." A pause. Then, They didn't ask for readability. She turned back to us. They asked for cause. No one spoke. Because the answer was already there. We had just been avoiding it. Ro stepped back to the table. Her gaze moved across the schematics still hovering in the air. Then she reached out and dismissed all of them. The room went clear. Empty. Except for us. And the decision. We don't show them who we are at our best, she said. Her voice was steady. Certain. We show them what made that possible. A beat. No hesitation left. The Aegis platform, she said. Hale closed his eyes briefly. Imani exhaled. No one argued. Because the moment for argument had passed. Ro looked at me then. Direct. Focused. Elias. Yes, You know those systems. I did. I had worked on them. Maintained them. Studied the ways they failed and the ways they didn't. Yes, You'll accompany us, she said. If something behaves unpredictably, I want you there. Not a request. Not optional. Understood. She nodded once. Prepare the transfer, she said. The meeting ended. And as we moved to carry it out, there was a single thought I couldn't quite push aside. Not fear. Not doubt. Something simpler. Heavier. We weren't choosing what to show them. We were choosing what they would feel. And for the first time since the object had appeared, I wasn't sure we understood the difference. The transfer shuttle was not designed for ceremony. It was functional. Compact. Built to move personnel between structures that had no need for aesthetic consideration. The kind of craft that did its job so consistently you stopped noticing it existed. We boarded in silence. Commander Ro at the front. The visitors behind her. The rest of us arranged along the sides, each maintaining a distance that had not been instructed but had emerged naturally over the last few hours. No one Saturday. The shuttle disengaged from relay point K-17 with a soft mechanical separation, the clamps releasing in sequence, the hull adjusting to the absence of support with a faint structural shift that I felt through the soles of my boots. Routine. Familiar. Everything inside the shuttle behaved exactly as it should, which made the presence of the four figures inside it feel less like intrusion, more like contrast. They did not brace for movement, did not adjust for inertia. When the shuttle rotated to align with the transfer vector, every human body in the compartment compensated automatically. Subtle shifts in stance, micro-adjustments in balance. The visitors remained exactly as they were. Unaffected. Not resisting motion. Not responding to it at all. As though the concept of acceleration did not apply. I told myself that was a perception error. A limitation in how I was interpreting what I saw. That explanation held for 12 seconds. Then I stopped trying to explain it. The Aegis platform came into view gradually. Not because it approached. Because we did. It occupied a holding position along the outer ring, decommissioned, preserved, and left in place the way certain things are left untouched not because they are useful, but because removing them would feel like erasing something that shouldn't be erased. From a distance, it didn't look like much. Angular. Segmented. Functional in a way that made no attempt to disguise its purpose. No flowing lines. No seamless integration. It had been built in sections, added to over time, repaired where it broke, reinforced where it failed. You could see all of that from the outside. Layers of plating that didn't quite match. Structural ribs exposed where newer materials hadn't been fitted over older ones. Surface discoloration from thermal stress, micrometeor impacts, emergency patchwork that had never been replaced with anything cleaner. It wasn't ugly. It just wasn't trying to be anything else. Docking in 2 minutes, the pilot said. No one acknowledged it. The visitors had shifted their attention to the viewport. Not moving closer. Not leaning. Just focusing. The soft, ambient tone they had produced earlier returned. Low. Collective. Not loud enough to dominate the space. But present enough that its absence would have been noticeable. I felt it again. That pressure behind the sternum. Stronger now. Not painful. But insistent. as if something inside me was being gently pressed, not to harm, but to locate. I adjusted my breathing. Slower. Controlled. The sensation didn't fade. It adapted. Matching me. The shuttle docked with the Aegis platform with a sound that belonged to a different era. Not smooth. Not quiet. A heavy mechanical engagement, locks aligning, clamps securing, seals compressing with a low, resonant thud that carried through the structure. The kind of sound you didn't design out. Because it told you something important had just happened. One of the visitors made a slight movement. Not away from the sound. Toward it. As if the impact had provided information. Commander Rowe noticed. She didn't comment. "Prepare for transition," she said instead. The inner hatch cycled open. The difference was immediate. Relay point K-17 had felt neutral. The Aegis platform did not. It felt occupied. Not physically. There were no active systems. No crew. No movement beyond what we brought with us. But the space held something. Residual. The air was still. Not stale. Just undisturbed. The lighting was dimmer than station standard. Emergency systems left active for preservation rather than operation. Shadows gathered in the corners, not deep enough to conceal, but enough to define the edges of the space more sharply than comfort required. The corridor beyond the hatch was narrow. Not by necessity. By design. Bulkheads close. Ceiling low enough that taller crew would have adjusted their posture over time without thinking about it. I had walked these corridors before. Years ago. When the platform had still been in limited use. When systems failed more often than they succeeded. When every repair was temporary and every temporary fix became permanent because there was no time to replace it properly. I stepped through the hatch behind Commander Rowe. The moment my boots made contact with the deck. I felt it. Not through the structure. Through myself. A memory. Not visual. Not auditory. Just presence. Gone as soon as it registered. I stopped. Just for a fraction of a second. No one else reacted. Or if they did. They hid it. The visitors entered last. And when they did. The sound they produced changed. It dropped. In pitch. In rhythm. What had been a soft, harmonic tone became something slower. Heavier. Not discordant. But strained. Commander Rowe turned slightly. Watching them. "Is there an issue?" she asked. The lead figure did not respond immediately. Its attention had shifted. Not to us. To the corridor. To the walls. To the space itself. "We are processing," it said. The pause between the words was new. Small. But unmistakable. Rowe inclined her head. "We can proceed at your pace." "No," the figure said. More quickly this time. "We will continue." That, too, was new. Not the words. The insistence. Rowe accepted it. "For now. This platform was constructed during an earlier phase of our expansion," she said as we began moving. "Its design reflects the constraints and priorities of that period." She did not elaborate. She didn't need to. The walls did that for her. Every surface carried evidence of use. Scratches. Scoring. Areas where panels had been removed and reattached so many times that the fittings no longer aligned perfectly. Sections where materials didn't match, older alloys patched with newer ones, each with slightly different textures, different ways of catching the light. Nothing here was decorative. Everything here had a reason. Even if that reason no longer applied. We moved deeper into the platform. The corridor opened into a wider junction. A central node where multiple sections connected, engineering access, habitation compartments, systems control. The kind of space that would have been busy once. Crowded. Alive with movement and noise and urgency. Now. Still. Commander Rowe paused. "This was a primary operations hub," she said. "Most activity would have passed through here." The lead figure stepped forward. Closer to the center of the junction. Its head tilted slightly. Then. It made the sound again. But this time. It wasn't soft. It wasn't melodic. It fractured. The tone broke midway through, splitting into something uneven, unstable, as though whatever process had produced it had encountered resistance. Every human in the room felt it. This time, no one pretended otherwise. I saw it in the way Hale's hand tightened at his side. In the way Imani's shoulders stiffened. In the way my own chest constricted. Sharply. Not pressure anymore. Something closer to impact. The sound cut off abruptly. The figure didn't move. For a moment. No one did. Then one of the others. The one positioned slightly behind and to the left. Made a different sound. Short. Irregular. Nothing like the harmonics we had heard before. It reached out. Not to us. To the lead figure. Its limb, arm, for lack of a better term, hovered just short of contact. As if unsure whether contact would help. Or make it worse. Commander Rowe took a single step forward. Careful. Measured. Tell me what you're experiencing, she said. Her voice was steady. But the room was not. The lead figure turned slowly. Its gaze met hers. And for the first time since they had come aboard, there was something in it that I recognized. Not curiosity. Not analysis. Something closer to strain. The density, it said. The word came out uneven. As though it had to be assembled. It is increasing. Rowe didn't look around. Didn't check the systems. She knew as well as I did. There was nothing to measure. In what way? She asked. The figure's head tilted again. But this time, the motion was unsteady. Information, it said. A pause. Then, more quietly, unresolved. The corridor seemed to close in around us. Not physically, but perceptually. As if the space itself had acquired weight. Rowe held its gaze. Do you want to stop? She asked. The question was real. Not procedural. The figure was still for a moment. Then, no. The answer was immediate. Too immediate. We continue. And that was when I understood. We weren't guiding them anymore. They were following something else. Something we couldn't see. Something already here. And whatever it was, we were about to reach it. We didn't have to go far. That was the part that stayed with me later. Not the distance. The inevitability. The Aegis platform wasn't large. Not by modern standards. Its layout had been expanded and modified over time, but its core structure remained compact. Built when resources were limited and space was something you optimized, not wasted. The section we entered next had been engineering. Primary systems control. The place where everything that kept the platform alive had been monitored, repaired, and, when necessary, held together by people who understood that failure was not an abstract possibility. It was a timeline. The lighting here was lower. Not intentionally. Just degraded. Panels that hadn't been replaced. Systems left in preservation mode. Shadows gathered in the recesses between consoles, along the seams where bulkheads met deck plating that had been replaced in uneven sections over the years. Commander Rowe slowed. Not stopping. Just adjusting. This area handled core environmental regulation, she said. Atmosphere, temperature, pressure, everything required to sustain life during extended operations. Her voice remained steady. Professional. But the words felt insufficient. The lead figure moved ahead of her. Not by much. Just enough to break formation. The others followed. Closer now. Tighter. Their earlier spacing, careful, measured, had collapsed into something more instinctive. Less controlled. We reached the central console. It dominated the room. Not because it was large. Because it had been used. The surface bore the marks of decades. Microfractures in the material. Scoring along the edges where tools had been set down too hard, too often. Sections where panels had been replaced with components that didn't quite match, their interfaces slightly misaligned but functional. It was not pristine. It was worked. The lead figure stopped. Directly in front of it. Its attention fixed. Complete. The sound it made this time did not finish. It began as before. A low, harmonic tone. Then, it broke. Not gradually. Violently. The note fractured into sharp, uneven segments, each one colliding with the next, overlapping in a way that felt wrong, not just to hear, but to experience. I felt it in my teeth. In the base of my skull. A pressure that wasn't external. As if something inside me was being forced into alignment with something that refused to align. The figure's posture changed. Subtly. But completely. Its balance shifted. Not physically unstable. But strained. One of the others made a sharp, irregular sound. Another stepped closer, its limb extending again. This time making contact. The moment it did, both of them recoiled. Not away from each other. From the space. Commander Rowe moved. 2 steps. No hesitation. "Emissary," she said. Not louder. Sharper. "Tell me what you're experiencing." The lead figure turned toward her. And whatever composure it had maintained was gone. Its eyes, if that's what they were, shifted. Rapidly. Light cycling through them in patterns that had no rhythm. No structure. The voice that came was not the one we had heard before. The precision was still there. The vocabulary. The syntax. But the control was stripped away. "The heat," it said. The words came unevenly. Broken across breaths that didn't belong to respiration. "The pressure." It stopped. Not by choice. By overload. Its limb lifted. Hovering over the console. Not touching. Not able to. The failure. Another pause. Longer. Then. Quieter. The people. The room held still. Every system. Every person. Every thought. Fixed in place. Commander Rowe didn't move closer. Didn't retreat. "Describe it," she said. The figure's limb trembled. Not with motion. With restraint. "They remain," it said. Each word forced. Extracted. Not as memory. A pause. Then. With a clarity that cut through everything. As presence. The others were reacting now. Openly. The harmonic baseline they had maintained since boarding. Gone. Replaced by sharp, fragmented sounds that overlapped without coherence. 2 of them had moved back. The third remained close, but its posture had collapsed inward, as though reducing its exposure. The lead figure's focus snapped. Not to us. To the console. To the walls. To the space itself. "They are here," it said. The words came faster now. Not controlled. Not filtered. They did not leave. Its limb dropped. Closer. Closer. Stopped just short of contact. They could not. And then. It did touch. Barely. A single point of contact between its surface and the scarred metal of the console. The effect was immediate. Total. Its entire form locked. Not rigid. Overwhelmed. The sound it produced was not sound. Not in any way we could process cleanly. It was too layered. Too dense. Fragments of tone and distortion collapsing into each other. Something between a signal and a scream. And through it. Words. Not spoken. Forced. The fire. A break. The containment. Another. The choice. Then. The one that stopped everything. The fear. Silence. Not absence. Impact. Commander Rowe stood perfectly still. Her voice, when it came, was quieter. "Emissary." The figure did not respond. Its limb remained in contact with the console. Its entire form caught in whatever it was experiencing. "The loss," it said. The word stretched. Distorted. The end that did not end. It pulled back. Violently. As if burned. The connection broke. And with it. Whatever held it in place. It stumbled. Not gracefully. Not with the controlled transitions we had seen before. It moved like something escaping. The others were already moving. Closing in. Not to observe. To leave. Commander Rowe stepped aside. Not blocking. Not interfering. "Clear the path," she said. No one needed to be told. We moved. Instinctively. The visitors did not wait. Did not look back. They moved through the corridor. Not transitioning. Running. And the sound they made was not harmonic. Not structured. It was fractured. Chaotic. And unmistakable. Fear. I followed to the threshold of the corridor. Watched as they reached the hatch. As the shuttle interface activated before they arrived. As the door opened. As they crossed it without slowing. And were gone. The hatch sealed behind them. Silence returned. Not the same silence. Heavier. Altered. Commander Rowe remained where she was. Looking at the console. At the place where the figure had made contact. At the marks that had always been there. And now. Meant something else. No one spoke. Because we all understood. At the same time. We hadn't shown them our past. We had let them experience it. And whatever they had felt. Was still here. The message arrived 9 minutes after their shuttle cleared the docking perimeter. Not through external comms. Not through any channel we monitored. It appeared the same way their first message had. Already inside. Displayed across every active system on the platform and relayed simultaneously back to relay point K-17. No header. No signal trace. Just text. Contact suspended pending reassessment. Commander Rowe read it once. Then again. No change in her expression. But I saw the shift. Not in what she felt. In what she understood. Get me everything, she said. No urgency in her voice. No raised tone. Just direction. And we moved. Fast. Because movement was the only thing that made sense. The debriefing room on K-17 felt smaller than it had before. Not physically. But perceptually. As if the space itself had lost some of its neutrality. Or perhaps. We had. Data filled the central display. Environmental logs. Structural readings. Audio capture from every section of the platform we had passed through. Every measurable variable. Accounted for. And none of it. Explained anything. No anomalies, Hale said. Flat. Controlled. But there was something under it. Frustration. Not at the data. At its absence of meaning. Atmospheric conditions stable, Imani added. No contaminants. No pressure fluctuations beyond expected thresholds. Electromagnetic readings. Rowe asked. Clean, I said. Because they were. Every system had functioned exactly as designed. Nothing had failed. Nothing had changed. Except. Everything. Rowe stood at the head of the table. Looking at the data. Then past it. Walk me through the moment of contact, she said. We did. Piece by piece. Frame by frame. The audio playback filled the room. My own voice. Rose. The visitors. Then. The shift. The fracture in the sound. The words. The heat. The pressure. The people. And then. The rest. We listened to it all. No one interrupted. Because interruption implied uncertainty. And there was none. When it ended. Silence followed. Long. Heavy. Rowe didn't speak immediately. She let the silence settle. Then. We showed them a structure, she said. Not a question. A statement. Hale nodded. Yes, And they experienced something else. No one answered. Because that wasn't a question either. It was the problem. Rowe turned. Looked at me. Elias. Yes, You've worked those systems. Yes. You've been in that room before. I have. She held my gaze. Did you ever feel anything like that? The honest answer was no. So that's what I gave her. No, A pause. Then. But I've never experienced it the way they do. That mattered. I saw it register. Rowe nodded once. Get me someone who understands that difference, she said. Dr. Lena Corvin arrived 36 minutes later. Xenocognitive systems. Specialist in non-human perception models. She carried a data pad and an expression that suggested she had already read enough to know this wasn't theoretical anymore. Commander, she said, taking her place at the table. Ro gestured to the display. You've reviewed the logs. I have. And? Corvin didn't answer immediately. She studied the playback again. Focused on the moment of contact. On the shift in the visitor's behavior. On the language. When she spoke, it was precise. Careful. Their processing model is not interpretive, she said. Ro didn't move. Explain. They're not analyzing what they observe, Corvin said. They're receiving it. A pause. Then. Directly. Hale frowned. That doesn't make sense. There's nothing in the environment that would. There doesn't need to be, Corvin cut in. Not sharply, but firmly. She looked at the display. At the console. At the space where it had happened. You're assuming the environment is empty because our instruments say it is, she said. That assumption may not apply. Ro's gaze sharpened. What are they detecting? Corvin hesitated. Not out of uncertainty. Out of scale. Residuals, she said. The word settled into the room. Uncomfortable. Unfamiliar. Define residuals, Ro said. Corvin exhaled slowly. Every system records something, she said. Not intentionally. Not in a way we can access directly. But matter doesn't exist in isolation. It interacts. It absorbs. It retains patterns of energy, stress, usage. She gestured to the console on the display. That platform operated under extreme conditions, she continued. High thermal variance. Structural strain. Repeated failure and repair cycles. That doesn't explain, Hale started. Corvin didn't let him finish. Add human factors, she said. Now her voice changed. Not louder. But heavier. Close quarters. Sustained pressure. Fear responses. Adrenaline. Neural activity at survival thresholds. She looked at each of us in turn. People don't just act in those environments. They imprint them. Silence. Not confused. Recognizing. Ro spoke first. You're saying the platform retains experience. I'm saying, Corvin replied carefully, that whatever their perceptual system is, it's not limited to current states. She tapped the display. They didn't misinterpret that environment. A pause. Then. They accessed it. No one moved. Because the implication was immediate and absolute. Hale shook his head slightly. That's not possible, he said. Corvin didn't argue. She didn't need to. It happened, she said. That was enough. Ro turned back to the display. To the console. To the exact point where the figure had made contact. They said the people were still there, she said. Corvin nodded. From their perspective, she said, they are. The room went quiet again. But this time. It wasn't uncertainty. It was understanding. Slow. Uncomfortable. Irreversible. Ro spoke into it. We brought them into that space, she said. Yes, Corvin replied. We told them it represented us. Yes. And they experienced. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Corvin did it for her. A concentration of human extremity, she said. The words were clinical. But the meaning was not. Ro closed her eyes. Just for a moment. Then opened them. And we called it an introduction. No one corrected her. Because there was nothing to correct. The second message didn't come to us. Not directly. It was picked up by long-range relay. Translated. Delivered through official channels. Structured. Formal. Clear. The kind of message you send when you want to be understood. Even if what you're saying cannot be softened. Ro read it in her office. Alone. I was there because she had asked me to be. Not as an engineer. As a witness. They have suspended direct contact, she said. I nodded. We already knew that. They've issued a broadcast. That was new. To who? Everyone, she said. She handed me the translation. I read it. Once. Then again. Because the first time wasn't enough. They described us carefully. Precisely. Not hostile. Not aggressive. Not intentionally dangerous. But something else. A species that encoded its most extreme states into the structures it built. Not deliberately. Not as a weapon. As a consequence. They described the Aegis platform not as a relic. Not as a machine. As a field. A dense accumulation of unresolved human experience. Pain. Fear. Decision under pressure. The moment where survival was not guaranteed. Repeated. Layered. Preserved. And then. They said the part that mattered. They said. We were unaware of it. That we moved through these spaces without sensing what they contained. That we preserved them out of respect. Without understanding what that respect had created. And then. The warning. Not to avoid us. Not to fear us. But to be careful. Because a species that could do this, without knowing, was a species whose limits had not been defined. I finished reading. Lowered the display. They think we're dangerous, I said. Ro considered that. Then shook her head slightly. No, she said. They think we're something they can't model. A pause. Then. That's worse. She went back to the Aegis platform that night. Alone. I know because I followed. Not directly. Not close enough for her to notice. But close enough to see. She stood at the observation deck overlooking the section we had taken them through. The lights were lower now. The shadows deeper. The platform unchanged. Exactly as it had always been. Exactly as it would remain. She didn't move for a long time. Just stood there. Looking. Really looking. At the walls. The scars. The marks we had learned to see as history. And nothing more. Then she spoke. Not to me. Not to anyone. To the space. We didn't know, she said. The words were quiet. But they carried. We didn't know what we were keeping. No answer came. Of course it didn't. The platform was silent. It had always been silent. But standing there. After everything. Silence felt different. Not empty. Full. As if something remained. Not alive. But not gone. Ro took a breath. Slow. Controlled. Then another. And when she spoke again. Her voice had changed. Not in tone. In certainty. We survive, she said. The words settled into the space. Simple. Absolute. We endure what should end us. A pause. Then. And we remember. She looked at the console. At the place where the visitor had touched. At the point where everything had shifted. They felt that, she said. Not a question. A realization. They felt all of it. Silence again. Then. Something else. Not comfort. Not pride. Something more complicated. More human. They were right to leave, she said. Another pause. Longer. Heavier. Then. But they were wrong about one thing. She turned. Not fully. Just enough. As if acknowledging something just beyond the edge of perception. This isn't a weapon, she said. Her voice was steady. Certain. It's a record. A beat. And records matter. She looked back at the platform. At the scars. At the structure that had held together when everything else tried to come apart. They'll warn others, she said. They'll tell them what we are. Another pause. Then. Quieter. And they won't come close. She considered that. Not dismissing it. Not resisting it. Accepting it. Then. Good. The word landed with quiet finality. Because she understood something now. Something the broadcast had made clear. Even if it hadn't meant to. If others stayed away. If they hesitated. If they chose distance over confrontation. Then the Aegis platform. And everything like it. Was still doing what it had always done. Holding the line. Not with weapons. Not with force. But with memory. With the accumulated weight of everything we had endured. Pressed into the fabric of what we built. A warning. Not spoken. Not intentional. But unmistakable. She stood there a while longer. Then turned and left. The platform remained. Silent. Unchanged. And carrying, whether we understood it or not, everything we had ever survived. Because that was what we did. We built. We endured. And we left behind more than we knew.